Well, it's no secret that I love this woman. And I think a lot of you feel the same way that I do. She is hysterical. She makes her point beautifully. And I think she's one of the most intelligent people I've ever met in my life. Yeah, right? I just wish, well, of course, I think I know I've forgotten about half of what she already knows, but she is, to me, just the, yeah, she comes from integrity. She comes from this wonderful place of authenticity. So it's my wonderful pleasure to introduce to you today our sister and our wonderful friend, Paulette Jones.
Aww. I love you, especially. Oh, that's great. So I'm hysterical, apparently. Apparently I have to start hysteria going on in here. Maybe that's not what you meant. God bless. You never know. You never know. God bless each and every one of you. Hi, everybody.
Hey, Paulette.
I love you. I love your guts. I love you so much it hurts. So we're here today in celebration, you know. We're celebrating, and there's always reason for parties, right? Ralph, you know that. There's always reason to celebrate. And today we are going to celebrate our interdependence. Actually, for the rest of our lives, we are going to celebrate our interdependence, because that certainly is worth celebrating. And we think of the celebrations that we've carried on this past week, this weekend, the celebration of the 4th of July, our independence. And that is a celebration of our separation from a government that no longer served us, to the creation of something new, something wonderful, something beautiful, something called the United States of America, something called you. And so there is plenty of reason to celebrate that oneness. And now I'm looking beyond that oneness to the human family. And it was wonderful as I started to prepare this. Of course, the universe conspires to support me. And I ran across this wonderful, wonderful quote that I want to introduce you to right now by Desmond Tutu, Bishop Desmond Tutu, about this wonderful idea about our oneness. And you're going to hear it over and over today until you're really pretty tired of hearing it and you start like threatening me with violence. But don't do that. Don't do that. Because we're all celebrating our oneness, our interdependence. We're going to be using that word, interdependence and oneness, kind of interchangeably. Okay, Andy?
Okay.
That's good. That's what we're going to do. Andy's on board. Yes!
I'm with you. I'm with you.
Yeah, yeah. And here you go. Here's the quote. And, well, there we go. I always mess with this. The God who existed before any religion counts on you to make the oneness of the human family known and celebrated. God can't do it on his own. That's why we're here. We are co-creators in the world. And one of our jobs, I think this is absolutely beautiful, to make the oneness of the human family known and celebrated. Wow! Wow! Wowzer, wowzer, wowzer. We've got plenty of reason to celebrate, and this really touches my heart and my soul, and it embraces our oneness. Now, Andy's already past our oneness. You're already working on your two-ness, right? He is. He's working on his two-ness, so he's way beyond us. Today we're going to focus on our oneness, on our interdependence, and we are visions of love. We are creators of love. That's what we're doing. We are loving each other. We're all about love, and I think of the love of wisdom, and that's what the Greeks referred to as philosophy, the love of wisdom. So we are going to engage in philosophy this morning. As a philosopher would say, we are going to do philosophy. We are going to do philosophy, and we recognize We're not the first to ever do this. Actually, this has been done lots and lots by lots and lots of people, including this person. This person. Actually, this who you're looking at is a guy named Marcus Aurelius. Now, we have all heard of anybody who spent more than half a millisecond in any science of mind course. Many of us have heard about Marcus Aurelius. But today I want to tell you about the rest of the story. Thank you, Paul Harvey, wherever you are. The rest of the story. We may know about Marcus Aurelius from the words and the things, the wonderful metaphysical messages that he left, his rich intellectual legacy. But did you know this same Marcus Aurelius, who is really Marcus Aurelius Antonius, get ready for it, Augustus, because he was an emperor of the Roman Empire, and he served as Roman emperor from 161 to 180. And during that time, he was a warrior, and he engaged in slaughter, much slaughter, thousands and thousands of people. During the reign of him, he ruled Rome from 161 to 180. And during that time, he conducted campaigns against the Parthians in the east. The Parthians had been defeated a long time ago, and yet they rose again as an empire. And so he led his troops east in war against the Parthians from the last 10 years of his life. From 170 to 180 AD, he waged relentless war campaigns against the Gauls in what is today current-day France, and against all of these Germanic tribes. So he would spend the evenings at night working with his generals, plotting the next day's strategy to slaughter thousands of folks. And then he would retire to his tent and he would write something known as the Meditations, which is an extraordinary piece of human literature, and it reflects a deep respect for the humanity of mankind, a deep respect for our oneness. And indeed, this is a quote from him: "All things are linked with one another, and this oneness is sacred." Does this sound like the words of a warrior? And yet they are. There's nothing that is not interconnected with everything else, for things are interdependent, and they combine to form this universal order. There's only one universe made up of all things, and one creator who pervades them. There's one substance and one law, namely common reason in all thinking creatures, and all truth is one. Okay, everybody, recite that now, by memory. We're having a test. What an extraordinary idea to come out of the mind who is engaged in this slaughter of thousands and thousands of people. That only sounds, how do we reconcile that, Ralph? It only sounds strange to us in the West, but not to him. He was a warrior, and that was his mindset. That's why he was put on this earth, to become a warrior, but also to become a metaphysician. And today we honor him. We don't honor his military achievements, but we honor what he wrote because of his oneness. This doesn't make sense but to us in the West. But if you ever read the Bhagavad Gita in the East, that's what it's all about. That's what it's all about. We have something known as our svadharma, our duty, our responsibility to the oneness. And you can imagine him going through these he spent much of his life as a warrior, and then at night he would go into his space and he would think about the oneness of the universe. And he probably did that. Why? Because maybe he understood at some level that the God who created everything, who existed before any religion, was counting on him to make the oneness of the human family known and celebrated. I told you I was going to keep returning to that quote. So we're all celebrating. He saw the oneness of humanity, and we look to ourselves and we celebrate. Well, what did we do yesterday? We celebrated the 4th of July. But do you know what really happened on the 4th of July? The truth is, not a lot. It wasn't the day that the United States declared independence. It wasn't. That happened on July 2nd. And it wasn't the beginning of the Revolutionary War. That happened back in April of 1775. And it wasn't the day that the Declaration was presented to the British. That didn't happen until November of 1776. And it wasn't the date that Jefferson wrote it. That happened in June of 1776. So what the hell actually happened?
It was an off day.
They took a break and had pizza. They did. They had a party. It was actually the day. It was presented on July 2nd to the Continental Congress, but it took them a couple of days to agree to some changes. And when they came back on July, Andy, you're the guy who told me this story, Andy. So blame him if you don't like it.
I tell you this.
So they come back. There's July 2nd. They present it, and there was some wrangling. There were some negotiations, and so they had to rewrite it. And they presented the second version back in July 4th, and on the bottom was inscribed the date July 4th, 1776, but it wasn't signed until August 2nd. But it became July 4th because it's imprinted right on this document that is now in the National Archives. And there was something called the Dunlop broadside. You've seen broadsides. It's just a page, a one-page kind of a newspaper thing. In the old movies, you used to see them, in old westerns, you see them spinning out. It's one page with a bunch of stuff. Well, they took the Dunlop broadcast and they inscribed upon it the Declaration of Independence, and they put at the bottom July 4th, 1776. And that was widely distributed throughout the territories, the colonies, and that's why everybody agreed, hey, it's July 4th, 1776. Yay! But nothing really happened. Isn't that true? And then we assign so much meaning to sometimes to things that didn't really happen. But the meaning of this goes far beyond it. And I want to draw your attention to the second sentence of the Declaration of Independence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, among those life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Yeah, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. There had never been a government, any kind of formal government entity that had addressed the issue of human happiness before this. And they took it to mean happiness in connection to the larger body, the totality of who it is that we are. We all have the right to pursue happiness. Doesn't mean that we're always going to attain happiness, but the right to pursue happiness. And this phrase, the second paragraph, it leads off the second paragraph, gave birth to the Equal Protection Clause of the Constitution, and also to a grateful nation, a nation that is indivisible, that comes together in our oneness. Now, declaring our oneness, that doesn't mean we know that we live in a perfect world, does it? Because we don't live in a perfect world. I'm proof of that. We don't live in a perfect world. We live in an imperfect world, and we have to accept that imperfection. Just because we declare that people have the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness doesn't necessarily mean that that life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness is always guaranteed, because we know that there are dark forces in the world, right? We've seen evidence of dark forces in the world. We have understood darkness in the world, but we also understand that darkness is nothing more than the absence of light. Darkness is an illusion. And we seem to see some corner of hell open up recently and show up in Charleston, and some darkness touch the lives of 9 amazingly wonderful, beautiful people. And I didn't even know them, but I know that that is true about them. You know how I know that? Because of a quote that came out of this. You know, out of our darkest hours, some of our finest moments arrive, and the words "hate will not win" came out and echoed across the conscience of a nation. And we came together in our sadness because we were so inspired by these amazing people who stood there. There was a woman named Ethel Lance, I believe her name was, who was one of the victims, and her daughter, through her tears, was actually at the bond hearing for this person who had committed an unspeakable atrocity on the world and on the family of man. And she looked into his eyes through her tears, and she said that, "I forgive you." and she asked God to bless him and to give him forgiveness, that God shows mercy on his soul. What an amazing lesson. What a powerful, so it's a demonstration of something beautiful that can grow out of something horrible, something tragic, something that seems to deny the humanity of the oneness of our humanity. But it can't, because the darkness can only exist in the absence of light, and the light of God's love was shown upon these people, and it's demonstrated through this idea of our oneness, our coming together. I think I'm reminded of a quote from William Shakespeare. You might have heard of him. Some William Shakespeare who wrote The Merchant of Venice. And I think of Shylock, and Shylock is in the courtroom, and he gets to say his speech, and he says, I am a Jew. Hath not Jew eyes? Hath not Jew hands, organs, dimensions, senses, appetites, passions? We're fed by the same food. We're wounded by the same weapons, subject to the same means, warmed and cold by the same winters and summers as Christians is. If you prick us, do we not bleed? If you tickle us, do we not laugh? If you poison us, do we not die? Yes. Yes, 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 yes to all of that. We all laugh if we are tickled. We'll all die if we're poisoned. But the love of God can change poison to a sweet nectar. It can banish darkness with lightness, and it can show the world that greatness, that love, that our unity of God coming together can come out of the darkest of our souls. And why am I telling you that? Because we're celebrating our oneness. Why am I telling you that? Because the God who existed before any religion is counting on you and me, counting on us to make the oneness of the human family known and celebrated. And that celebration, I see that oneness, I see here. I see every time I come into this place, and I am well, there you go. I am hugged. Some of you may want to hang me, but a couple of you can tolerate me. So I give you those hugs, those demonstration of love and of our oneness. And that gives rise to something that has been identified as the beloved community. The beloved community. Many of us have heard of the beloved community, and it's a reality. It's here right now. And the beloved community is just a statement, a vision of a world where hate and intolerance and homelessness and lack and all of those things are limited, because the human race just won't stand for it anymore. We will rise together as one and recognize our oneness. That's the beloved community. And Dr. Martin Luther King made it popular, but he did not invent the concept. The concept was invented by Josiah Royce was his name, a theologian in the early 20th century, and he founded something known as the Federation of Reconciliation. And this concept of the beloved community grew out of that. But Dr. King came along and added something to it, to the beloved community. He made it personal, and he said this about it and the power of love that brings us together as one. And this wonderful quote, with every ounce of our energy, we must continue to rid this nation of the incubus of segregation. But we shall not in the process relinquish our privilege and our obligation to love. Our privilege and our obligation, it's a privilege to love. We're not going to give that up for anything. While abhorring segregation, we shall love the segregationists. And this is the only way to create the beloved community. By recognizing that even if we see people who we disagree with, people who hurt us, people who wound the world, we can still recognize that at the very core of who we are one. We are together. Now, that's a lesson that we can all learn. I think it's obvious to all of us that there is this underlying oneness of wonderfulness, of godliness that is in each and every one of us. And we're not the first to see that. I already talked to you about Marcus Aurelius, but let me talk to you about some other incredible minds. You're going to recognize these minds, but if they were standing here, each of these people, they would tell you something different about our interdependence. And I would start with Aristotle. Aristotle wrote extensively on happiness. He wrote something called the Nicomachean Ethics. And in the Nicomachean Ethics, he talked about the idea of happiness, that happiness is our right. Happiness is even our responsibility. It is what we are to achieve, but that happiness can only be achieved in our oneness, in understanding that we are connected to the world, to everyone. I'm telling you this why? Because the God who existed before any religion wants to remind us and to understand that the family of the oneness of the human family is to be known and celebrated. We're knowing and celebrating. Aristotle was knowing that, and he was celebrating it. Now, we're connected to more than each other. We're connected to the universe. And here we have an image of Leonardo da Vinci next to something known as the Vitruvian Man. The Vitruvian Man celebrates the perfection of the human form that fits within both the forms of a circle and of a square. And when you take a circle and you superimpose a square within it, you are squaring the circle. And that talks about the perfection, the oneness. And it talks about our connection to all that is, the connection of our physical form to the idea of our physical form, to the essence of who we are at the very basis of our humanity, our physical form. That's really what the Vitruvian Man is saying. So he's saying it in just a different way, in a very Leonardo-ish kind of way. And then we think of the Buddha. The Buddha, some 2,600 years ago, we've heard about the Four Noble Truths. We've heard about his visitation, his enlightenment that came to him in the form of the Four Noble Truths at Bodh Gaya some 2,600 years ago. And we hear a great deal of that. But what we don't hear is that's a foundational practice of Buddhism. But the foundational belief, what's at the very basis of all Buddhist philosophy, is three ideas: impermanence, that nothing lasts forever; selflessness, that we are ourselves, we are without essence. But the one that I really want to talk to you about and unpack this wonderful metaphor is our interdependence. How the Buddha said just what I'm saying today, but probably much more eloquent. And he talked about three components of independence. Again, this interdependence, this again is the very foundation of Buddhism. And of course, Buddhism is one of the premier philosophical perspectives. Not really a religion because it's not involved with a deity, but nonetheless, it certainly gives us some great ideas for thinking. And this metaphor, if I unpack it and I put it over here, we are interconnected. We are all one in three very important ways. And if I unpack this metaphor, I find out that these three ways are, first of all, cause and effect. John, you are the effect of many, many causes that have taken place throughout the history of the world, of the universe, really. You're here because of all of those causes. And what you do today, it will create an effect down the road, all right? So our oneness is we can't operate in a vacuum. Everything we do, every time we touch someone, hug someone, show love to someone, that actually is understanding our interdependence. The second is part-whole dependence. Look, we are not, whenever we say, Oh, who are you? We start talking about ourselves. We describe ourselves as a mother or a father or a child or a sibling or a member of a congregation or a member of a political party or a member of a nation or a member of something. We get our identity, who we are, by our relationship with the world around us. We don't operate in a vacuum. We are interdependent with everything else that is. Everything else that is. So the final one, so it's cause and effect, part-whole dependence, and the final one is something known as conceptual imputation. And I know you may not have heard that term, but what you have heard is we see the world not as the world is, but as we are. We look at the world, and if I were a Buddhist, I would tell you I'm engaging in conceptual imputation by giving things names. I am taking my concept and I am imputing them onto this concept, to this idea. And when we get down to Ernest Holmes, saying it comes out as we see the world, not as the world is, but as we are. So we've got some of the greatest minds in the world that are saying, I know it's hot as hell, isn't it? I feel like a Big Mac up here under these lights, you know. You want fries with that? Jeez, somebody hose me down. Not you, Andy. Anybody else? Anybody else? Anybody else? So, you know, this pattern, I'm going to tell you another little story because this pattern repeats in nature. We see it in nature. And I'd like to introduce you to three friends of mine. Here you are. This is Mo, Larry, and Curly. Mo, Larry, and Curly are going to give us some information today. We're going to use them as a model. And notice their color. They're green and yellowish kind of. These are locusts, and you can tell right away that they are locusts. And I'm going to talk to you about grasshoppers and locusts, because all locusts are grasshoppers, but not all grasshoppers are locusts. Does that make any sense? Why are you saying this, Paulette? Because the God who existed before any religion wants us to make the oneness of the human condition known and celebrated. That's what we're doing. That's exactly what we're doing. We're making it known and we're making it celebrated. And I'm demonstrating the power of consciousness, of our collective consciousness, to come together, and it is reflected in this amazing story of bugs. Of bugs, yeah. All locusts start out life as grasshoppers. Not all grasshoppers become locusts. It is certain types of grasshoppers, known as the short-horned, but they become locusts in a very interesting way. Most grasshoppers spend most of their lives in solitude. They go out, they eat their grass, they hop. That's what grasshoppers do, and they're about done for the work, for the day. That's about all they do. But certainly, sometimes some conditions come together. And these conditions are conditions of overabundance. When there is so much food around that something happens. And those little grasshoppers transform by the power of oneness. They transform from their individual state of grasshoppers, which kind of live alone. But sometimes when this comes together, something happens and something switches in their brain when they come in contact with the collective consciousness of swarms. So here's how it works. It physically transforms them. Our connections with the world physically transforms us, and it's reflected in this concept of grasshoppers turning into locusts. And they change physically. Suddenly something happens. There's a huge abundance of food. Something clicks within these beasties and they begin to change. They change from a brown color to a yellow or greenish color as they transition to locusts. They begin feeding like crazy go nuts, like a football team, just scarfing everything down in sight. And it's been estimated by the World Hunger Organization of the UN that a swarm the size of Manhattan, which does happen throughout the world, can consume enough food to feed 45 million people in one day. in one day. Well, that isn't the rest of it. The oneness, when they come together into this feeding swarm, they've eaten everything in sight, so what happens next? They grow wings. They grow wings and they fly so that they can move on to the next target. What a beautiful metaphor I think that is. That our consciousness, when we come together and we are bound as one and we recognize our oneness, we sprout wings metaphorically and we can fly. We can fly to our higher selves. Our higher selves, because our higher selves is calling us. And what we've realized through, what I've come to realize through my study and putting this together, was that we become our higher selves through the connections that we have with all that is, with God, with ourselves, with the universe, with the loving people, the kind people in our lives. We couldn't be who we are without all of these people together. And I'm telling you this because, here it is, because the God who existed before any religion needs us, urges us to celebrate the oneness of the human family, the oneness as we all come connected together. Now I know I can read minds. Did you know that? I can read minds and I know exactly what each and every one of you is thinking right now. What you're really thinking is, yeah, if you could just wrap it up, that'd be great. Anybody ever see that movie, Office Space? It's hilarious. Hilarious. So that's what you're thinking right now. Lynn Marie, don't deny it. My daughters are over here, by the way. That's Cassie and Megan. So would you guys just wave your hats? That's my kids. 2 of my 4 protege. So I don't know how they got past security, but here they are. I do. I love you guys. And so I'm going to wrap it up because, well, that'd be great. And I want to start where I began. I want to start right back at the beginning where I began and where I've continually returned you throughout the course of this morning. And I want to tell you how much I love you and how grateful I am for each and every one of you and for allowing me to come here. And I guess I'll wrap up, well, you know what I'm going to wrap up with? The God who existed before any religion counts on you to make the oneness of the human family known and celebrated. So what I'd like to invite you to do today is go out there and make the oneness of the human family known and celebrated, because that's who you are. That's what you do. And the world needs each and every one of us to do that. We talked about the beloved community. Wow! Here we are. Look around. This is the beloved community. This is an extension of God. This is a manifestation of our oneness, and our oneness pulls us together, and our oneness unites us, and we rise, we fly, we sprout those wings, and we go to our higher selves. So I invite you to fly to your higher self. That's where you belong. That's where God wants you to be. And that's what the power of our oneness together allows us to do. I'm so in love with each and every one of you. I love your guts, as I said. So God bless each and every one of you. Namaste. Thank you. God bless each and every one. Thank you. I love you. Wow.